Hi, I'm Dr. Mark Pope, a teaching fellow at Imperial College, and in this presentation I'm going to talk about interviews and questionnaires. We'll look at their definition, consider what data they can gather, what research questions they can help answer, the potential difficulties involved with using these methods, and also the other methods they can be used with, including sampling. And finally, we'll talk about setting up these methods and consider some of the types of questions that can be used within the questionnaires or interviews. So what is an interview? An interview is a conversation where one person elicits information from another, usually from an individual or a small number of individuals. Interviews can have varying amounts of structure, ranging from those based on a strict set of questions to very unstructured, improvised discussions. In this presentation, we'll be focusing largely on structured interviews. And what is a questionnaire? A questionnaire has similarities to a structured form of interview. A questionnaire is composed of a list of questions, but is usually completed in writing. And both interviews and questionnaires are means of conducting surveys. What data do questionnaires or interviews gather? What information do they yield? Questionnaires typically gather statistical data and factual information, and data is generally structured according to the set questions, and often also to the set choice of answers. But questionnaires or even structured interviews could include open questions that prompt more open-ended answers. Therefore, while often the information yielded is appropriate for quantitative analysis of statistics, there can be limited potential for qualitative assessment too. As questionnaires and structured interviews interrogate people, they primarily can gather data and descriptive information about people, their backgrounds, behaviour and experiences. With certain lines of questioning, they can go beyond this to yield information about people's opinions, knowledge and attitudes, or even values. If the appropriate respondents with relevant knowledge, background or experience can be found, useful information for a wide range of research questions can be generated. Questionnaires and structured interviews are particularly effective in gathering factual data about people, including personal information such as that regarding their age, gender, income, etc. When this personal data is combined with other information, they can be useful for research questions making correlations between knowledge or opinion with personal characteristics or demographics, i.e. age, gender or nationality. This can facilitate cross-sectional studies within a particular social group or comparative studies between social groups. Depending on the data, longitudinal aspects or trends over time might be assessed too. Because of the fixed nature of questionnaires and structured interviews, they are less flexible, and they therefore can restrict the exploration of interesting avenues that arise during questioning. Moreover, set structures may create difficulties in trying to establish a rapport and engagement between the interviewer and interviewee. Also, respondents may not be able to articulate what they think, believe or feel in the time and space provided. It is therefore very important to construct questions carefully so as to facilitate clear articulation from respondents. The researchers should try to minimise ambiguities, but there is always a possibility that respondents may misinterpret questions. Added to this, the responses may be ambiguous or difficult to interpret clearly. Furthermore, respondents may simply lie, make mistakes, remember incorrectly, or give answers that they believe the interviewer wants to hear. And the sample of people surveyed may be less representative than planned. Therefore, even with set questions, interviewing can never be fully objective. Can these methods be used with other methods? Yes, depending on the research question, interviews or questionnaires could be combined with most other methods. Furthermore, sampling is likely to be a key element of questionnaires and structured interviews, and complex methods of sampling can be used. However, simple methods can also be very robust. Samples are made up of members of a particular group of people that is of interest to a researcher. The broader group from which the sample is selected is also known as a population. Researchers need to decide which population they would like to draw people from to question. This should be a population that can provide them with relevant data or information for their research question. There are different types of sampling. For a purposive sample, a researcher selects each respondent very carefully according to who he or she believes has the appropriate expertise or background to provide most valuable insight. Alternatively, if a researcher would like to make generalizations about a population, they can select a random sample with a view to producing representative data on that population. Often, a volunteer sample is used where people are asked to volunteer themselves to participate in an interview or questionnaire. However, these samples are unlikely to be representative of the population. A snowball sample may also be used. This is where respondents refer the researcher to other respondents. And this can be an effective way of researching networks, but it is also unlikely to be representative of broader populations. A key factor that increases sampling error is non-responses, where respondents do not answer the questions. A representative sample can be significantly biased when a number of respondents do not complete the interview or questionnaire. A real example of a structured interview is provided by the Opinions and Lifestyle Survey conducted by the UK Office for National Statistics. A random sample of about 1,800 adults aged 16 and over living in private households throughout Great Britain is selected for each survey that takes place. After accounting for refusals and where no contact can be made, approximately 1,000 interviews in people's homes are conducted each month. Data on behaviour is collected to reveal longitudinal trends over time. For example, the internet was used daily or almost daily by 82% of adults in Great Britain in 2016, compared with 35% in 2006. More detailed data can lead to more insight regarding trends. In 2016, 77% of adults bought goods or services online, up from 53% in 2008, but only up 1 percentage point from 2015. Cross-sectional analysis can be made too, here by comparing age groups, comments and opinions. For example, the speed of delivery was a problem encountered by 42% of the 16 to 24-year-olds who had bought online, compared with 15% of those aged 65 and over. Where the same method has been used, comparisons are facilitated. The Statistical Office of the European Union, Eurostat, is the principal user of these statistics, and they make comparisons between countries that are members of the European Union using data and information collected using the same methodology. Designing the interview schedule or questions to be asked. Primarily, you should be thinking about which questions will retrieve you useful information. So how do you elicit answers where you can be happy with their validity for your overall research question? Firstly, when constructing your questions, you should consider whether each question is valid and whether it will help measure the concepts you are trying to assess. Secondly, think about whether your questions can be understood and answered by all the respondents. So try to avoid being ambiguous or too general. Avoid jargon and define key terms. Another good tip is that multiple short questions are often better than long Complex ones. Thirdly, try to avoid questions that are presumptuous or leading. Fourthly, try to avoid vague language. For example, the question, "Do you often watch TV?" uses the word often, which could be interpreted differently by different respondents. Questions can be open or closed. Open questions are where the respondent can formulate their own answer and expand on it. For example, questions that prompt an explanation are open, i.e., how did social media impact on the Vote Leave campaign in 2016? But it is closed questions that are used more in questionnaires and structured interviews. Here are some examples of different types of closed questions where the respondent is given a choice of answers. Firstly, simple yes or no questions. Secondly, multiple choice questions could be used, such as the one on the screen. Thirdly, ranking questions could be used. Fourthly, Likert scale questions could be used. These are where the respondents indicate the amount of agreement or disagreement they have with a particular statement. So here is a step-by-step guide to interviews and questionnaires. Firstly, undertake sampling and recruitment of interviewees and respondents. Secondly, design the interview schedule or questions. The next task is to select a comfortable location and appropriate mode of recording data. This might involve respondents filling in a form, the researcher taking notes, an audio recording, or even a video recording. Fourthly, before you conduct the interview or distribute the questionnaire, check that you have informed consent. So, inform participants of the title and purpose of your project and ask those participants for their consent for you to question them and to use the resulting data. You should also make it clear that participants can withdraw their consent at any point. Finally, you should conduct the interview or distribute the questionnaire. To conclude, questionnaires and structured interviews provide a potentially fast, effective and reliable method, and you can consider using them for your own research project.